Well, welcome to Oregon, and here's a chipper place to start today's adventure. A cemetery! Because nothing says family fun like death. We are sitting here at the Hillcrest Memorial Park, perched just above the downtown of Grants Pass, Oregon, because in this cemetery lies the mortal remains of an amazing Disney legend. And as I am traveling up to the top of Oregon from Southern California, I thought we might as well avail ourselves of the opportunity to visit the last resting place of one of the least known but most influential Disney artists of all time, and it's this man right here, Carl Barks, also known as the Good Artist, or in his own time, more accurately, as the Good Duck Artist. Carl Barks right here is not only the creator of Scrooge McDucks, but also, literally, the good artist for all the Donald Duck comic books and many other Disney comics, when those Disney comics were the biggest comic books in the world, probably the most influential thing on generations of children. We almost never talk about Disney comics now, in the United States anyway, but to this day, all over the world, they are celebrated, they are beloved, they are a big deal everywhere else but the US, especially in Europe. You go over there and you see Disney comics everywhere, particularly Uncle Scrooge comics, which are completely different from our idea of Uncle Scrooge if you grew up, in more modern times in America. Scrooge, as created by Carl Barks, was basically the original Indiana Jones, and in fact, some of the collections of the original Scrooge comics by Carl Barks will have forewords by Steven Spielberg, Gary Kurtz, the producer of Star Wars, George Lucas. All of the greatest storytellers of our time grew up reading the works of Carl Barks. Now, of course, back in the classic era, in the 50s and 60s, and back, no Disney artist was allowed to sign their name to their work, right? Everything was just kind of produced under the banner of Walt Disney. Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse, Walt Disney's Donald Duck, Walt Disney's Uncle Scrooge. Not out of personal vanity, but because this is how the great brands were invented. I think nowadays, especially with the internet, we have a little more nuance, we have a little more capability of holding in our heads the company and the producers and the artists that worked on things. That was just not the norm back then. So if you grew up reading Donald Duck comics or Scrooge McDuck comics, and millions of children did, oftentimes the only way to differentiate between one writer or artist and another was by looking at their art style, and that is why Carl Barks became known as the Good Artist. All the fans would say, oh, it's one by the Good Artist, gotta grab that one. Anyway, most of the time Carl Barks was working for Disney. He was living out in Hemet, California, but later moved up here after he retired to Grants Pass, Oregon with his wife, Margaret Barks, right there. He was born in 1901, the same year as Walt Disney, but died in 2000, which is pretty mind-blowing. He lived a long time and was ultimately buried right up here side by side with his wife, and he was actually officially inducted as a Disney legend before his passing. And not only that, we got to see Uncle Scrooge live on in the works of Don Rosa, got to live to see the influence that he had on things like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and the like, and even lived long enough to experience the early days of the internet and see how much international fame he had acquired. He was a true inspiration, a true legend, a true artist and storyteller. And as a fan, it's a true honor and privilege to visit his last resting place. They actually now publish a Carl Barks library. I have a ton of those books at home. I highly recommend picking those up if you ever have the chance, and the continuation of Carl Barks' work, the Don Rosa Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. It is a masterpiece. Don Rosa would 100% say, well, I didn't do anything. It was all Carl Barks, but that's not true. Don Rosa did a lot, and they're amazing books as well. But it all started with Carl Barks. And if you'd like to visit him, right off the 5 freeway in Grants Pass, Oregon, you just come in the gate, hang a left at the little mausoleum there, and he is sitting right in the shade of this giant evergreen tree on the first lawn you'll encounter. All right, well, this may be Carl Barks' final resting place, but it's not ours. I've got a long way to go today. You know what, though? Before I leave town entirely, there's just a couple more spots I need to see, because when I get into something, I get into stuff. This house right here at 810 Oregon Avenue, this is where Carl and Margaret first moved in 1983 when they came up here to Oregon. Obviously, the house has been heavily remodeled. It's a pretty dang nice neighborhood up here, actually. And then he ultimately moved up the same street to 1415 Northeast Heritage Drive right here when his wife passed away. So this was the final home, or the final 2 homes, really, of legendary Disney artist Carl Barks, the creator of Scrooge McDuck. It's weird, they're side by side. They're like 3 houses apart. Anyway, there'll be more on Carl Barks in the future. At least if I have anything to say about it. For now, though, now that we've done that little piece of recon for the future, there was nothing left to do in Grants Pass but grab a little bit of coffee. For some reason, I was craving that McDonald's medium roast coffee. It's about the only thing I can have from McDonald's these days. And see the caveman, the mascot of Grants Pass, Oregon, home of the cavemen, or as the plaque on the base of this statue puts it, domain of the Oregon cavemen since 1922. And would you look at the size of that Neanderthal? I believe the Oregon caveman is the mascot, in fact I know it is, for the local high school, which I actually just drove past earlier between Carl Barks' house and here. In fact, the stadium even had a big old Dutch Bros advertisement on it. And I saw home of the cavemen, all huge, and I went, oh yeah! It would not be a trip to Oregon, from California anyways, without stopping and paying our respects to our ancestors. He's one of the funkiest, derpiest, coolest roadside icons in America. And anyway, besides being the name of, you know, the local high school's teams and such like, this plaque makes it seem like the Oregon cavemen is almost like a secret society over here, like the Elks Lodge or something. Look at this, it says they have a chief bighorn, a rising buck, a wing feather, and keeper of the wampum. I could use some more wampum, I'll tell you that much. The caveman is actually in this little garden next to the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center. And you know what? I've never actually been to the caveman while the visitor center is open. I'm gonna go inside and ask about it. Okay, that visitor center is weird. There are so many people in there for some reason, and I found out it is like a secret society. Started by local businessmen in 1922 to sort of promote the area and its interests and tourism and all that stuff. They started the Caveman Club and dressed up in animal skins and wigs and would apparently like hijack celebrity appearances. So like if JFK came to town or Richard Nixon or something, they'd all dress up and hoot and holler. They held up the ribbon cutting ceremony for the Golden Gate Bridge for 45 minutes for acting all crazy and wild and cavemanish. And here I thought he was just a high school mascot. I guess the 16-foot caveman statue was sculpted back in 1970 by a guy named Richard Ellis and had to be refreshed this century because some kid stuck a flare in his hand and burned up the original caveman pretty bad. But he's made of tough stuff, this weird looking freak of a roadside attraction, and he still survives all the way up until today. He's in such a weird, like, funky pose, you know? Anyway, been a while since I've been up here, but it's always my tradition to stop at the caveman. I'm glad I passed by the high school so I can remember. And look at this! Some free dog slippers. Kind of reminds me of the van from Dumb and Dumber. Anyway, the caveman is right off the freeways, right next to the visitor center. There's free parking, nice restrooms. If you have a little more time, Grants Pass is also home to all these bears. So all over town, they have all these different themed bears here, at least in the summer months. If you got the time, it's quite the scavenger hunt. I, of course, do not have the time today. I am on my way north through Oregon, and I've got to be in Astoria tonight. And basically, Grants Pass is all the way at the bottom of the state. Astoria is all the way at the top of the state. But tonight, I will be sleeping with one-eyed Willie if all goes according to plan. So it's time to hit the road. Dude, pound for pound, Oregon might be the prettiest state in the union, and I've been in 49 of them. It's a pleasure to drive through, which is lucky for me. I've driven for a while, and I still got at least 5 hours to go, not counting stops like this. Luckily, I love to drive. I'm used to it, and I'm good at it. Just this trip as an example, I would way rather drive 16, 17 hours from home than get on an hour-and-a-half plane flight. That's how much I prefer driving. And thanks to essentially growing up touring in bands, I've driven I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of miles. I was just thinking last night, what percentage of my life have I spent at truck stops? It's not insignificant. Anyway, pit stop. Junk to eat. Dude, have you eaten these? I am sure these have absolutely no nutritional value whatsoever, and they smell weird and they taste weird at first, but for some reason I can't stop eating them, which is why you just can't start. You just can't start. Oh, heck yeah. So this is where people are getting those sick skull caps from. Ooh, look at this one. Ooh, what do you think, brother? New look. You know how like Carhartt, like work clothing became fashionable? And like 30 years ago, you know, Dickies became very fashionable work clothing. I always want to know if truck stop fashion will ever become in vogue. Like, what would the world look like if you could only wear stuff you buy at truck stops? Why is all the stuff that tastes so good so bad for you? Here we go. Here's what I'm after. Get some string cheese and stuff. Maybe some eggs. Ooh, and maybe get myself a snoozable. Or how about this? Y'all like pickleballs? All right, I couldn't help myself. I had to know what a pickleball tastes like. Here we go. Tastes like a pickle. Oh, the aftertaste. Ugh, I gotta wash my mouth out with acid. No more balls. All right, I'm still making tracks, but the old back was starting to get stiff, so I headed to downtown Cottage Grove, Oregon, because there's all these signs always advertising the historic district, which right now is pretty ripped up. Oh, the main street is all torn up and being reconstructed, as you saw. But I pulled over just next to City Hall to see this old covered bridge, except it's not an old covered bridge. This covered bridge, the Centennial Bridge, is younger than I am. It was built in 1987. And okay, I guess some of you are gonna say that does make it an old wooden bridge, but it was actually built out of the remains of two other original wooden covered bridges to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of Cottage Grove. They remember. They remember. Wow, dude, look at the view from on this bridge. Apparently, Cottage Grove is the covered bridge capital of the West. Supposedly, at one point in this county, there were 90 covered bridges, which is pretty crazy, because when I think of covered bridges, I think of Vermont, I think of Maine, I think of New Hampshire. Anyway, two of those original 90 bridges were salvaged to at least make up portions of the Centennial Bridge here, which is literally right off of Main Street and River Road. But apparently, there are still plenty of old, authentic covered bridges in the area. And this is precisely why, even on days where I'm supposed to be hauling it across country, I always stop to do recon, which is why it always takes me twice as long as whatever GPS app tells me it's gonna take to get anywhere, but also why people are always asking me, how did you know about this place or that place? Because I stop, because I look. You want to know the secret? It's just get out there, look around, ask around. A lot of the times, there'll just be a sign on the side of the road, historic district, stuff like that, and that's how I ended up here. Something weird though, because while I was on my way trying to get into the historic district, I noticed more than one crazy vehicle in town. Like, look at this. It's the Deathmobile. Dude, look at this. Deathmobile. What in the living heck? It's like a 66 Batmobile with a tank turret on top. I don't know who built the Deathmobile or why, but this thing is awesome. I want to drive it. Aw, rats, it's locked. Look at the little cockpit inside of the Deathmobile. I love it, dude. I love it. And look at this. It's not the only monster truck in town. I was looking for an explanation, but this banner provides it. There's a speedway in town, and apparently there will be monster trucks this weekend. Hey, that's what I just said, and I was just about to say, man, I always wish I could ride in a monster truck. I don't think they're famous for having passenger seats. However, this, buddy, is an exception. Look at this. It's got a bunch of seats in the back. It's a, I was gonna say passenger monster truck. It's almost more like a monster truck bus. Look at all those seats back there. Dude, I love that. What is that, like Tyrannosaurus truck? I need to ride in this thing. This thing is awesome. Actually, what I need to do is get out of Cottage Grove and keep heading up north. Because as much as I'd love to be part of Monster Truck Weekend, I've got other plans this weekend, which is the whole reason I'm headed north. Just one more thing that I saw when I was getting off the freeway to stop at before we keep going. Something that had no explanation before I stopped and saw all those banners, but which in the moment made me stop and go, what, the truck? It's freaking Megasaurus, dude. I have always wanted to see this. He's just parked on the side of the road in Cottage Grove. I can only assume that he's sitting out here parked like this in this parking lot because of the malicious monster truck tour that's appearing here this weekend. But holy T-Rex, dude, I have always wanted to see this ever since I was a kid watching The Simpsons. Remember Truckosaurus? Freaking Truckosaurus. This is Truckosaurus, not his real name. It's Megasaurus, but this is a freaking 23-ton, 30-foot tall, that's 6 alleys tall, by the way, fire-breathing, car-eating, robotic dinosaur built on a literal Sherman tank chassis right there. It's part tank, it's part T-Rex. It is all Megasaurus, dude. I have always wanted to see this thing in action, but I think randomly seeing it on the side of the road is even better. Oh my gosh, the only way that it could get any better than this is if somebody popped out of Megasaurus right now and asked me if I wanted to go for a ride or if I could continue my road trip in this thing. Look at the size of that thing. Dude, look at this. It's literally built on a tank chassis, or chassis as the fancy old-timey automobile people would say. Look at the missiles on the back. Why does it have missiles or rockets? Why not? Look at the giant caution symbol back here. Now, I don't think there's any way this thing is street legal, right? I don't think Megasaurus can just go cruising down the road like my RAV4. It is clearly very specifically parked here on the side of one of the major roads going to Walmart to get everybody in town's attention. And I must say, as a piece of marketing, that is highly, highly freaking effective. Oh, sure enough, there's the little door right there. I have no idea how you see out of Megasaurus. I'm assuming this is some sort of mesh right here because I can see through this part. Gosh, that is amazing, dude. I don't know what else to say about this thing. I wish he'd breathe fire right now, though. Actually, you know what? As I'm standing here looking at this, I think there was an earlier version. I think there was a much bigger version, actually, in the late 80s called Robosaurus. I think that's where Truckosaurus comes from. It was like massive, huge, way bigger. That's the one with the claws like this and like the pointy back of the head that also ate cars and stuff. Pretty sure Megasaurus is like from the early 90s, though. So a similar time period. And in my lifetime, this is the one that I always see like on posters or I see videos of it. I'm like, oh man, I want to see Megasaurus. So I think there were predecessors. And I said this yesterday when we were in Sacramento exploring that underground speakeasy, but I want to release expletives of joy looking at this thing. It's freaking Megasaurus. And I don't know where he normally lives or if he even has a home base or he's always on the road, but someday I want to take a ride in that thing. Put that on my bucket list and smoke it. Truckosaurus! All right, I could stay staring at this thing all day. In fact, that is what I'm tempted to do. I'm tempted to just stare at this, stay in town all weekend, see this thing in action, breathing fire, eating cars, crushing stuff. But I have to get into my much less exciting vehicle, my little Toyota RAV4 hybrid over there. Man, it feels weak having a hybrid in the face of a freaking fire-breathing Sherman tank. But it cannot be helped. Dude, look at that kid's getting a fun pic. You know he's sending that one to me, Mom. Anyway, there's no time for further delays. I still got about 4 hours to go. Time to hit the road. Actually, speaking of which, maybe I can make myself feel better if I start calling my car Bug Slayer. I don't know if it's a white car thing or what, but I feel like there's always bugs all over it.
Take that, you filthy bugs.
All right, 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer. You take one down, pass them around. 98 bottles of beer on the wall, 98 bottles of beer on the wall. Ah, I see Enchanted Forest. Shout out to all the Tofties, dude. I love Enchanted Forest. Dang. Well, I eventually made it to Salem, the capital of Oregon, ran into a little traffic, which more than a little annoyed me. So I decided to take the back way out to the Oregon coast up Oregon 22, and I'm glad I did. Like I said, Oregon, pound for pound, one of, if not the most beautiful state in the Union. It's just so green, so green. If Bigfoot doesn't pop out, I'm expecting leprechauns at any moment. All right, seeing the first signs of civilization in a while, which means we're getting close. Close to the ocean, that is. There's still gonna be 2 hours of driving northwards. But on a day like today, not a cloud in the sky. I couldn't care less. This is awesome. See, doesn't this just look like Bigfoot could pop out at any moment? Well, I didn't quite make it to the coast yet, although I am on the 101 now, the main highway. But the temperature has dropped quite a bit, and I can see in the far distance through my couple of views out towards the ocean, a little bit of mistiness, a little bit of clouds. I had to pull over for a little pit stop. And look at this tiny little rest area. Some drives are just fantastic. All right, well, it took forever, but we finally made it to the coast. Or well, at least to Tillamook Bay, and dude, mood change ahead. Look at all the mist and clouds rolling in from the Pacific Ocean. It's getting me in a spookier, more epic mood, which is perfect because what this weekend's gonna be all about is one of the greatest movies ever filmed in Oregon. I'm heading up to Astoria for the 40th anniversary of The Goonies. And even though we have finally reached the ocean, where it's a lot colder, by the way, we've still got something like an hour and a half to go until we actually get into town, into the Goondocks themselves. So it's time to hit the road again. I never know what's gonna happen on days like this, you know? Might be like 50 roadside attractions, might be Megasaurus, might be a lot of stops, a few stops. That's the risk you take, but boy, look at this. This is beautiful. See the moon rising over the trees out there, just the last remnants, I think, of sunshine we're gonna see for the day. Awesome. Dude, I just love driving up the coast and seeing stuff like this. Like, look at this. This is where the Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad leaves from. And I say this about a lot of places because it's true for me about a lot of places. I always wish I could spend more time up here on the Oregon coast. It's just gorgeous. Every little town makes me want to stay and play. Like, I can see a little rock shop over there. There's a pub called the Ghost Hole. Now that my son has graduated from high school, coming up soon, it won't be so much about time constraints, mostly just budget, but we'll talk about that later. Like I've been saying all day, Oregon's just so gorgeous, and especially the Oregon coast. All right, into the mist. All right, well, I thought the sun was coming back, but then the mist settled down hard. It was spooky, it was creepy, it was gorgeous. And now look at this. Right over here on the other side of this bridge, we've made it to Astoria. We're at the tippy top of Oregon. That is Washington State over there across the water. Our journey is nearly over. I suddenly have Cyndi Lauper stuck in my head. It is good to be back in the Goondocks. That deer knows what I'm talking about. Astoria. All right, well, I took the first left turn that headed towards the water. It is the official Goonies 40th anniversary weekend in Astoria, Oregon, where it was filmed, and I'm not gonna be alone this weekend. Tomorrow we'll be running all over town, we'll be meeting up with friends, we will be going full Goonies, full Astoria. So I figured, why not pull over here into the old port? Thank you guys for watching this very random, very off the cuff, who knew what was gonna happen adventure and sticking with me till the very end. That's what makes you part of the all the way to the very end club. Our adventures aren't often quite like this, but if you'd like to see more like this, you can always buy some sick merch in our merch store at randomland.com or join the Patreon. That helps more than anything else could possibly help, other than sharing these videos with your friends, liking, subscribing, all those things that are actually free. But for now, because we've done our duty, I'll leave it there. Time to hotel and sleep well. See you tomorrow, Goonies.